It is time for us to talk about our main event of UFC 265. And for the sixth time, we have got an interim heavyweight title fight which is taking place. It is Derrick Lewis versus Ciryl Gane. A little bit of trivia for you, John. As I mentioned before, this is the sixth interim heavyweight title fight. Can you name 3 of the past 5?
So we had Verdum versus Mark Hunt. That was one.
That's one.
Let's see. Was there one during the Cain Velasquez era? Let's see. Brock Lesnar versus Frank Mir, was that one?
That was for the full belt.
Oh. Brock Lesnar versus Shane Carwin, was that?
That was to
Was that
unify
for
the
the
belts
interim?
as well. I'll give you them.
Really?
It was
Yeah, I don't know.
Andrei Arlovski versus Tim Sylvia. That was number 1. And then we had Arlovski defending the belt against Justin Eilers, UFC 53. Then we had 2 which involved Frank Mir. So it was Frank Mir versus Minotauro Nogueira. Minotauro Nogueira versus Tim Sylvia. And we also had Shane Carwin versus Frank Mir. So there you go. Those are the 6 beforehand. So this is going to be number 7.
Yeah, this is better than those fights, honestly. Those are all pretty weak sounding fights, to be honest. Well, Mir versus Nogueira was fine, but Tim Sylvia fights, sheesh, that was a long time ago.
And where do you personally stand on this one as well? Because I've been very intrigued by sort of the audience reactions to this, and in particular, sort of the difference between the hardcore fans and the casual fans. Because when this fight was first announced, the hardcore fans, the people who watch this kind of show, were absolutely up in arms about this interim title fight. They just thought, oh, it's so unfair to Francis Ngannou. He only won the belt 3 months ago, and you're only doing this for money reasons, etc., etc. The feeling from the casuals is, I wouldn't say they hate the fight, they just don't really understand why it's happening.
Yeah, I'm kind of indifferent to it, honestly. I like the quick turnaround for Gane. I understand putting the town guy in front of the hometown crowd. And is Lewis on a win streak? I mean, obviously he
All
knocked out
fight winning
Blades.
streak.
I mean, yeah, true. I mean, you kind of, I think he has kind of deserved a chance like this, even though some of those decisions were pretty iffy. The Blagoy and the Latifi fights were both like really close decisions. But fans like Derrick Lewis. I mean, he is a very likable guy. Not the greatest fighter, but how about you start with how you think the fight's going to go down, Karl? How do you see this one playing out?
Well, first off, I'd start by saying that I actually think that Derrick Lewis is actually a lot more technical than people think he is. Like, this might go over a lot of people's heads, but if anyone remembers a TV show called Robot Wars, there was a machine called Dietor, which was like this fur-covered flipper. And everyone just looked at it, it was like covered in fur, and everyone just thought it's going to get absolutely destroyed. And yet, Dietor was one of the most underrated machines, like really powerful. But because it looked the way it did, no one took it seriously. Derrick Lewis is a lot like Dietor. Like, he plays the fool, he plays the jokey sort of, oh, I'm such a bad fighter, people should be embarrassed to lose to me. But I mean, the guy is 260 pounds and can throw a jumping switch kick better than some featherweights can. So I think he's a lot more technical than people give him credit for. And I think, because if you look at, especially the Curtis Blade fight, I think is a good example of it. Now, you might say what you will about the way that Curtis Blade sets up his takedown attempts, but he knew exactly what Curtis Blade was going to do and landed that uppercut right on the nose to get that win. That isn't luck. That is a much more intelligent fighter than people give him credit for.
Yeah, I do agree. That was a nice, greatly timed shot. I mean, as good as a punch timing could be. But you saw Blade is like, you saw him hesitating. Like you knew it was coming. Like you go back and rewatch it, you can see the shot coming like 10, 15 seconds before he actually finally shoots that takedown. So it was very well timed. But the difference I see in this fight is that Ciryl Gane is just so much more athletic, so
Hmm.
much of a higher level striker. He doesn't really ever lean his head in like that. I mean, he stays vertical, he stays long. He never really gets himself out of range. He never puts himself in the pocket where he shouldn't be. So that was a great shot. I mean, he definitely hit his win condition there. He needed a one punch knockout to beat Blades, and that's what he got. And I think he needs a one punch knockout here to beat Ciryl Gane. The only issue for him is he's fighting an exponentially better striker than Curtis Blades was. And rewatching that Blades fight, I was actually shocked to see that Blades was the one outstriking him very, very cleanly in the first few minutes of that fight. I do slightly remember that happening. I remember Blades winning round one. I just don't remember Lewis looking that bad. I mean, like he was getting hit and he was covering up like he doesn't typically do. He was getting leg kicked really easily. I mean, his legs are so kickable. I mean, he never thinks about checking a kick. So, um, I think that Ciryl Gane's really just going to pick him apart. I don't see much of a path to victory for Lewis outside of that, Hail Mary knockout. But even that, he's fighting such an athletic, such a great striker, the better fighter. I mean, Ciryl Gane has really leveled up in his time in the UFC. Uh, I think Volkov is a better striker than Lewis, and Gane just picked apart Volkov, diffused him completely. Rosenstrike might be a better striker than Derrick Lewis. And again, same story. Gane picked him apart, demolished him over 5 rounds. So I think the speed, the athleticism, the footwork, the striking output, the leg kicks, the jab, I mean, everything is going to be too much for Derrick Lewis here. He's pretty much drawn dead. I think he's going to need a knockout in the first 2 rounds or he's not winning at all. So the odds have Gane at minus 350. That's like 77%. I think it's more like 85, honestly. So I don't give Lewis much of a chance here. Um, but then again, it wouldn't be that mad if he pulled off the crazy upset. I mean, to pull off a knockout like this in front of his hometown crowd on pay-per-view, it would be an incredible moment. I just don't think it's happening. What about you, Carl?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that because we run the opinion polls on the main channel and I asked people for who they thought was going to win this one. They've actually got Derrick Lewis. They actually think Derrick Lewis is going to win this one at the moment 60-40, which took me by surprise because I'm in a similar boat to you. I think that technically Ciryl Gane is the far superior striker. And I know a lot of people have mentioned before what happens if Derrick does land that big one punch. And Derrick's more than capable of doing that. We've seen him do it plenty of times before. But Jairzinho Rozenstruik is also a big power puncher. And I'm not sure how many times he did connect with Ciryl Gane, but Ciryl seemed to eat them pretty well. So I don't really have major concerns over his chin. I'm more intrigued, to be honest, by sort of like the fan reaction to Ciryl Gane because, like, sort of like at the end of 2019, after he just beat Tanner Boser, people were looking at this guy and then thinking, yeah, there's a lot of potential here. This guy could very well be challenging for the belt. And the one thing that people have been asking for more than anything is to have a heavyweight fighter with the striking that they have in, say, the bantamweight or the featherweight division. Ciryl Gane is that fighter. And yet, on the whole, the fans seem to hate him, even though he's delivering what we've wanted for a long, long time. A heavyweight striker that isn't a fat guy brawler.
Yeah, I haven't noticed any hate for him per se. I definitely don't think he's like a fan favorite quite yet. And that is because he does have kind of like a decision style. He's not really looking for that knockout. He's really just looking to stay safe and pick you apart. So I think the question in this fight becomes, are you leaning for Gane to knock him out or for Lewis to survive to a decision? Um, and initially, when the fight was first announced, I was kind of leaning towards decision, just because Ciryl Gane never really chases that finish. He's content to stay in the same gear he's in. Like if he's winning, he's outstriking you in whatever gear he's in. He's not going to really tune it up and go harder at you because he knows he's already winning. He doesn't really like to take many risks as a fighter. So I was kind of leaning decision when the fight was first announced, but after watching how badly Lewis looked in the striking versus Blades, I feel like Gane could get him out of there from accumulated damage. So what are you thinking?
I'm favouring Ciryl Gane by decision, but I'm in the same boat as you. I think that there's more chance of Gane finishing this fight than some people give him credit for, simply because Ciryl Gane throws a hell of a good body kick. And if there's one big weakness that Derrick Lewis has, it's shots to the body. Like, how many times have we seen him take a big shot and just start immediately turtling? And I know that might be part of his sort of game plan to try to lure people into a false sense of security, but I do genuinely think he struggles with the body shots. We've seen Mark Hunt do it, we've seen JDS do it, and if Ciryl Gane lands some of those big kicks, it could be over even in the first 2 rounds.
Yeah, and the leg kicks I think are going to add up. They're going to limit Derrick's mobility. I mean, he's probably just going to, if it gets to rounds 3, 4, and 5, I mean, I can just picture it now. Like, when Derrick Lewis like just stands at range, he just like exhales. He just like he just knows he's losing, but just keeps walking forward, just eating the strikes, just looking for that one punch. Like he has some really funny like mid-fight reactions. Like he's just taking the biggest breaths in the cage. While Gane's just going to be, hopping around, out jabbing him, kicking his legs off, and it really is entirely up to Gane if this ends by knockout or not. And I kind of lean for it to end by knockout. I'm kind of thinking like a 2-3 knockout for Gane. I just think the speed and the strikes are going to be too much, and Derrick Lewis is probably going to will to either a body shot, like you said, or leg kicks.
That being said, though, imagine the crowd reaction if Derrick Lewis was to finish Ciryl Gane.
Yeah, it would be cool, but it just seems so improbable. To like it's really hard to imagine it. I mean, like I said, the odds plus 275 for Lewis. That's not generous enough for me. I think you got to get better odds than that. What is Lewis knockout? I mean, that's the way to play him if you're playing him at all. Um, I don't even see odds for that right now, sadly. So maybe they're not out yet. But if you like Lewis here, just play him by knockout. It was my same advice versus Blades, and that was somewhat accurate. So Gane should do whatever he wants to him.
So one final question before we wrap up this little segment. Yes, the winner of Derrick Lewis versus Ciryl Gane is going to win an interim heavyweight title. But do you think the winner of this fight faces Francis Ngannou next? Because my inkling is that the UFC deep down still want Francis versus John Jones. And if they get it on their terms, that's the fight they'll make first.
Francis versus who?
John Jones,
Who
light
who
heavyweight
the
champion.
who the hell is that? I honestly don't even know who that is. When was the last time that guy won a fight? John Jones, Anthony Smith. Yeah, that guy's irrelevant. He ain't fighting at heavyweight. We've been over this before. John Jones wants nothing to do with heavyweight. He wants nothing to do with Francis Ngannou. And who cares? The UFC doesn't even want to pay either one of them for that fight. That fight's never happened. Yes, the winner of this fight is fighting Ngannou next, and it'll likely be Gane. And then we'll have a really fun discussion. Then we'll have like an actual, like real heavyweight fight where either guy has a legit chance to win, and that's going to be a fun matchup to discuss when the time comes.